what I notice about DeadHappy is that you are challenging the conventions of getting people to talk about death, to die responsibly. You're injecting humor and new emotion into a category that's quite been scary and intimidating. Yeah. But there seems to be a nuance and an intelligence and an empathy that you approach that with. I guess the question is, what is it like to be being bold and challenging those conventions whilst taking on this sort of empathetic and sensitive approach that you seem to be capturing?
I think it can be confusing for a lot of people, because I don't think a lot of people don't understand what life insurance is. So some people, we've been attacked by some people on social media thinking we're health insurance and saying we're never going to be like America, we don't want you. Some people get obsessed with, understandably, the point of death. So they think we're being insensitive about death and about people dying and people close to people dying in the pandemic. And actually, like we said, this afterlife planning is actually about people who are generally, people that get life insurance will be healthy. It's the very nature of getting life insurance. You can be fairly healthy. So it's fairly healthy people thinking about what they want, empowering them to get what they want after they die. So it's actually a very life-affirming process. When you break it down, it's about life as it is as much about death. But people focus on the death element and think that we're being insensitive to death. But there is this very natural sensitivity towards anything to do with death. And this is part of the reason why we have a purpose, which is changing attitudes to death, because this fear of talking about the D word, people don't want to mention death. And we don't want to force people to confront death, but we do want to make it easier for people to understand that there are things that they can do to help them plan for death. But it muddled in, it can be very confusing for people, and people do get really upset with us. They think, a lot of people think that we set up during the pandemic to somehow leverage the pandemic, or that we're called DeadHappy just to upset people. We have to be careful that we don't get too defensive with that, because we are human beings. We don't want to offend people. We do care about people, but it gets tricky at times. But it's really important for us, Zoe, that it's a mix of the funny and the profound. And I think you can do it. It's just, unfortunately, it's open to interpretation, and people will get offended by what they get offended by. So it's a really interesting minefield kind of journey.
Certainly within Facebook, which is the Wild West of comments and people and the sort of,
which we love, don't we, Lucy?
We do, yeah. And that, you know, our honchos are great at responding to that. But as Ed said, like, it is really important that you know, everyone is is aligned on like brand attitude and the way to respond to these. And Ed said as well, like, you know, we don't want to be defensive on this, but you know, we are kind of saying things as they are, really.
Engagement is really important to us, Zoe. So if people do engage with us on Facebook, we tend to try and keep that conversation going, and it does descend or ascend into a bit of banter at times. And in fact, sometimes we don't even do anything. Somebody will see an ad, be quite critical of us, complain about that, and then a customer or somebody else will pile in and start arguing with them on our behalf. And it's magic how this happens.
Lovely to watch the threads, isn't it?
Particularly on some of the Mick and Tell ads that we've done with our animated characters. We've had, one of the ads had over 2,000 comments. And if you look at an average life insurance ad on Facebook, it's probably 2 comments, maybe 4. So it's emotive, and we have a lot of fun with it, but straddling that sensitivity without being offensive is a real challenge for us at times.